Let's now talk to lead consultant and chief executive officer, 2612 Consulting and Professional Services. Well, he's not in the studio today. He's joining us live from London, United Kingdom. It's good to have you on the show, Mr. Peter Adebayo.
Thank you once again, Tolu, for having me on your studio. I'm quite eager to come to your premises to see that beautiful edifice that I just put up.
Yes, we will definitely be happy to have you join us in our studio. Let's start the conversation today and look at revenue issues. Of course, what's been happening. Government has been looking so much, so some say so ambitious, what government wants to work on with regards to our 2025 budget. How does it come to you, and how feasible do you think some of these projections are? How feasible are they to you in your thoughts?
Well, thank you once again, Tolu, for that question. The issue of revenue generation will remain an integral part of national development across the globe. If you look at the budget that has been passed, it's a budget that came in as 49.74 trillion, which at the time of passage ended up becoming 54.99 trillion. Of course, this is not to be unexpected. It is typical. It is natural. When an appropriation bill is passed to the National Assembly, you expect that it's going to go through modifications, and eventually there will be a figure. So it's been a part of the process, all along. But when you look at the figures there, each time I look at Nigerian budget figure, there's something that still frightens me, or there's something that still amuses me. I usually don't want to convert it to dollars, because by the time I convert it to dollars, you discover that it is still very, very small, relative to the size of our economy and the size of our population. But that is a story for another day. If you look at the revenue projections for the year, on the basis of the initial 49.74, it's an improvement, over what we had in the previous year. Last year, our revenue projection was, about 20, initially about over 18 trillion, before the increase of 6 trillion through supplementary budget. But I think this year now we're targeting, 34 trillion.39. That is even before the increase to 54.9. But again, if you look at it, of course, that's 88%, which is quite encouraging, right? But then, if you look at the expenditure aspect, you know that we still have a lot at hand.
Do you think, because many would think maybe the revised, the tax reforms and all of that is what government will be focusing on. How do you think that this funding will come through, for Nigerians for government to actualize this without too much of external borrowings?
Sincerely speaking, it has been a major issue, Tolu. Like I've always said, I've said it on this platform, and I've said it, quite in quite a number of places. There is nothing wrong in borrowing. There are two dimensions to financing public expenditure anywhere. You can finance your public expenditure through borrowing. In other words, that is through debts options. Or you can also consider non-debt options. More often than not, it is a combination of both debt options and non-debt options that make it possible for you to finance your projections. But if you look at this year now, I know it's going to be a bit challenging, because looking at 36 aggregate revenue vis-a-vis the 54.99 now, that leaves us with a gap of maybe about 18 trillion or close to, no, I think that's about 13.3 precisely that we need to fund. The question is, must we continue to borrow? Under the present circumstance, we don't have a choice. We still have to borrow, But while we are thinking of borrowing, what other options are available? All right. There is also a need for us to probably consider some of the infrastructures that we are trying to put up and ask ourselves, what is the best way to fund them? Can we take cognizance of private sector participation? In other words, I remember there was a time, that the issue of infrastructural development was given an incentive that private individuals who are going to be involved in spending or funding infrastructural development with particular emphasis on road network, that they can enjoy some tax incentives. How much of a leverage we have been able to give to that is another question entirely. But I think this is one of the areas, that we can consider to fund our expenditure. Now, there is one thing in expenditure management system. If I'm constrained with increasing my revenue under a circumstance, one other veritable tool that we can look at is to be a lot more prudent in our expenditure management system, because going through the expenditure management system, you discover that I try to look at the chunk, and this year alone now, we'll be funding the expenditure to the tune of 13.38 trillion. And if you look at the portion of the expenditure, which is actually the driving force, ordinarily, in budgeting, you are expected to aggregate your revenue and target your expenditure towards it. But unfortunately, over the years, we seem to have been, driving our expenditure as a major focus, as against tying our expenditure to revenue. What do I mean, Tolu? We need to establish, okay, fine, if we know what we are getting this year is 38 trillion or 40 trillion, what can we do to minimize our exposure to debt? And the only thing we can do under that circumstance is to be a lot more prudent. Because if you look at this expenditure, statutory reserves, debt servicing, recurrent expenditure, between debt servicing and recurrent expenditure alone, we are talking about over 30 trillion. So if we are going to be servicing debt and recurrent expenditure with over 30 trillion, that leaves us with just about 14 or 15 trillion to spend on capital expenditure. And if you don't have more budget voted for capital expenditure, it makes it difficult for us to drive infrastructural development. You want to agree with me that infrastructural deficit in Nigeria is so wide. So I would still want to advocate that part of our strategy must be, it's going to come with a lot of sacrifice on the part of those who are in government. And this takes us to, managing economically the cost of governance. I still think we are doing it. We're trying our best, but I believe we can do a lot more in trying to curtail our cost of governance, because, like I said, by the time you add recurrent expenditure of over 14 trillion with debt servicing of over 16 trillion, that has accounted for about 60 or 65% of the entire expenditure profile. And I believe that it is not something that we cannot do if we are very committed and sincere to address this.
Mr. Adebayo, please hold your thoughts for a minute. We have a breaking news. We'll come back to this conversation in 1 minute.